What is up, everybody? Chris of Midlife Crisis Media here. Welcome to the next episode of my Film Collection 2024 live streams. Today we are starting off with we're starting off on the Blu-ray section, the standard Blu-ray section, not collections, not television. These are just the standard one film per Blu-ray streams. And this is what's going to be taking up a lot of time for these streams because I do have a lot of movies. I will say that since I did these streams the last time, which was probably in 2021, I want to say, my Blu-ray collection has actually shrunk quite a bit because I've gotten heavily into collecting 4K UHDs. And if a movie that I like comes out on 4K and I already have it on Blu-ray, I get rid of the Blu-ray to make space for the 4K. So the Blu-ray streams will definitely be they'll be a lot shorter because I'm not going to try to cover like a wide range of letters in the alphabet. All of my stuff is arranged alphabetically, starting off with the numerals, and then we go alphabetically. So I'm not going to try to cover a large range in the alphabet like I did in the last ones. I remember the first episode that I did, it was like everything that started with the numbers, and I went all the way to the letter D, and that took like 3.5 hours. Well, I'm not doing that this time. These streams are going to be much shorter because my collection has shrunk, but we'll make up for it when we get to the 4Ks. And I'm covering less in when it comes. My range in the alphabet is shrinking. So today I'm going to talk about all of these standard Blu-rays that I have that start with a number or the letter A, and that is it. It's not a whole lot. I have like just one stack sitting here, but if you know me, I like to talk movies more so than video games. So I can probably turn this smallish stack of movies over here into a 4-hour stream if I really wanted to, but I'm not. I'm going to keep it short. And I just dribbled on myself. That's fantastic. On stream, too. I'm drunk. Fantastic. So, how's everybody doing tonight? Who's watching? Let me know what's going on. Let me know who you is. So, we'll start off with everything that starts in the numbers. And I have, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies that begin with a number, and I start with the lowest and go to the highest. I don't do with how they're spelled. I go with the number that is displayed on the cover. So the first movie, still haven't opened it since probably the original film collection streams that I did a couple of years back, or probably a few years back at this point. But I have seen this movie plenty. I used to have it on DVD when it first came out. I saw it in the theater opening day. It opened up against The Matrix. And I went and saw this in the afternoon and then went and saw The Matrix that night. And I was like, wow, I saw two really good movies in the same day that are just complete opposite ends of the spectrum. One was a comedy. One is, a classic sci-fi cyberpunk action flick. The comedy was 10 Things I Hate About You. So this is one of those Disney like teen movies that were kind of popular like at the tail end of the 90s. There was like She's All That and that kind of stuff. This one is actually a retelling of a Shakespeare play. This one is actually The Taming of the Shrew, just done as a teen comedy. And it's actually not too bad. It's the first time I ever saw Julia Stiles. It's the first time I ever saw Heath Ledger. This also has Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it, and it was, I think, not his big break because he was in Halloween H2O or H20 the year before. There's actually, I remember there being quite a few like people who were like nobodies at the time who ended up moving on. David Krumholtz is in this, who became kind of a big deal in the early 2000s. But it's a really funny movie. The one issue that I have with this, aside from it being like a teen comedy, is never let Heath Ledger sing. It's just, don't do it. There's a scene where he's trying to woo Julia Stiles while she's like out on the football field, and he starts like singing. I can't remember what song it is, but he starts singing it on the bleachers, and he's like dancing around up there, and it's really embarrassing. I do remember cringing in my seat. I think I was one of maybe 5 or 6 people that was in the theater that day. But I remember cringing watching him sing. But don't worry, his acting. I do believe this was his first movie after we're coming off of that TV show Roar that he was on. So it's like his American movie debut. And I mean, come on. And then he ended up with an Oscar. So I really do enjoy it. It's actually a pretty decent retelling of Taming of the Shrew, just through like a 90s teen movie lens. I need to crack that open and give it a watch again. Why I don't have the other one? Where did my... Oh, it's right there. Why did I mess those up? Okay, whatever. Anyway, we have 28 Days Later. This is a variation of a zombie movie that's done by Danny Boyle, who directed my favorite film of all time, Trainspotting. It was kind of experimental for him because in order to make it feel like the apocalypse, he kind of filmed everything with like these really low-res DV cameras that you can buy at Best Buy back in the day. This came out like in 2002 or one, I want to say, around about. And it's really grainy and it looks documentary-esque, and it was for a purpose because it's like, the apocalypse is happening, and then you got like this film crew like following you around filming in HD kind of thing. Actually, the DV cam footage actually makes, I think, the movie better. It makes it feel a little more claustrophobic because, like, since the footage is kind of blurry, sometimes you can't really see what's going on in the background if it's too dark because the footage is grainy. So I think it really works to the film's benefit. And first time you ever saw like zombies that ran, and I thought that was kind of rad. Although they're not really zombies, they're infected with rage, a rage virus. And there's a scene where you watch somebody get infected to the point, like, you see everything change, like from the point they get infected to when they start attacking somebody. And it's really kind of scary, especially when it happens to the certain character that it happens to. It's really kind of sad, but it's a great movie. This was kind of troubled in post-production. I guess they put the movie together and the movie ends on like originally ended on a real bummer. So the filmmakers went back and reshot a new ending that was slightly more upbeat and hopeful. I do prefer that ending. I think it works better. You need something after all the horrible things that happen in the finale, or things that are going to happen to certain characters. You need something like a little hopeful that like not all humanity has turned to absolute dog shit. But I really like it. First time I ever saw Cillian Murphy in a movie, and Naomi Harris. And they are absolutely fantastic. And like, they're two of my favorite British actors. I mean, Cillian Murphy just won an Oscar for Oppenheimer, and Naomi Harris went on to be Moneypenny in the Bond movies with Daniel Craig. They made it. They're good. Next up, we have the sequel, 28 Weeks Later, which actually does take place 28 weeks after that film took place. And it's a decent follow-up to it, although it does kind of cover a lot of the same ground. But it's like London has been cleared of the infected, and the government is now just finally allowing people to move back in with restrictions. And the main character has 2 kids, and he goes out to look for his wife that he left behind when the rage virus started taking over. He went searching for his wife, found her, and brought her back, and he came back. Turns out she's like a patient zero. She's one of these people that can be infected but will not turn, but they are able to infect anyone else. And of course, being that it's, his wife, he kisses her and he turns into the first zombie rage infected person back in this newly opened London, and he basically spreads it like wildfire. And it's about his kids trying to get out of London alive with a bunch of U.S. military troops. One of them is Rose Byrne. The other one is dude who plays Hawkeye. I can never remember his goddamn name. Jeremy Renner. And I remember I saw Jeremy Renner in SWAT previous to this, and I did not like him in that movie. I thought he was really bad in it, even though he was playing the villain. I thought he was just really bad. Here, I'm watching. I'm like, he's playing a variation of that character. He was a SWAT team member in that. Here, he's like a Marine. But I'm watching. I'm like, wow, like maybe it was just the script he was working with or the director he was working with that couldn't get a decent performance out of him, because in this he's really, really good and likable. So he might be one of those types of actors that just depends on who he's working with to get a good performance out of him. But I really liked it, and it ended on a cliffhanger that was supposed to lead into another movie that was rumored to be called 28 Fortnights Later or something like that. And now it's actually happening, being called 28 Years Later. We're almost coming up to that actually being true with how long it's been since this came out. Because this came out like in 2007, I want to say. So yeah, not too far off. But I look forward to it because those are really cool, like zombie variation movies. They're zombie movies, but not zombies. Next up, I have a 3D Blu-ray, and this is the sequel to 300: Rise of an Empire. I do have the original 300, but it is on 4K. And the thing is, I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. I actually prefer this to the first one. And why is that? Because the first one is a classic, depending on who you ask. Don't get me wrong, I do love the first one. It had a cool visual style. The action was great. It had a great cast, like Michael Fassbender, first time I ever saw him. God, I'm trying to think who else was in it. I mean, I knew Gerard Butler from other movies, but it was like his first big starring role, and he nailed it. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, it's great. This one, I think, did more. So this one is a prequel, a sidequel, and a sequel to that. So a good portion of this movie takes place before 300 does, before Leonidas goes off to fight Xerxes. And it deals with a lot of politics and stuff like that, and the beginnings of the war. And I cannot remember what this character's name is. Themistocles? I think this is Themistocles. I can't remember the actor's name either. It's all about him trying to delay the war and delay Leonidas from going off to fight, but Leonidas is like, F you, I'm the king. Pew, I go. So while everything from 300 is happening, you see Themistocles fighting on his own, but it's sea fights. It's sea battles. I just drooled on myself. Awesome. What is going on today? I don't know. A lot of battle scenes happen on boats that are on fire with horses involved, and they are really cool and complex fights. You've also got Eva Green in it, and she is playing this badass warrior. She is sexy as hell. She gets butt-ass naked in it. It's glorious. And then also, after Leonidas dies in the first movie, this movie shows you what happens afterwards with Queen Gorgo. Oh, God, I can't remember her name either now. The wife from the first one. Lena Headey. And it's what she did to deal with Xerxes and his army after her husband died. And it's really, really cool the way everything is kind of weaved together, because there's a couple of times where the characters from 300 and this one kind of intersect every once in a while. I thought it was really well thought out. I think it's slightly based on the Xerxes comic that Frank Miller did. But the thing is, I talked about this in one of the 3D Blu-rays to watch on your PSVR videos that I did, that this has some of the best 3D on home video that I've ever seen. Anything that involves having stuff happening in the rain, happening at sea with the boats, because the entire movie was filmed up against a green screen. So it's really easy to separate the backgrounds from the foregrounds, the actors from the backgrounds, and do the whole layering effect. That way, if you're filming reel for reel, you have to use a special camera to do that. Here, you can do it in post really easily, and it looks absolutely fantastic. It's some of the best 3D ever. So I do prefer this one more than the first. I think it has more going on in it, more to like. So that's why I prefer that one. I talked about this in March's pickup stream that I actually bought this. Why is this here? No. I have everything out of order. I'm dumb. Okay, so I should not even have talked about 300 yet. What the hell am I doing? I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. I should have talked about 30 Days of Night. I don't think this is the unrated cut. If there even is one. I don't remember. No, I don't think there was one. Anyway, this is a vampire movie that is based on a comic book that I read in probably 2004 or 5. And it had a really interesting look that the movie tries to replicate with the way the vampires look, because the vampires in the comic book, their mouths just looked weird. They did not look human at all. They looked very animalistic, I guess is the word. They kind of have shark teeth. They had just black on black eyes, and their eyes are really small. They're really smooth. It was a really weird and interesting look. And they use CGI in the movie to make the vampires look as close to that as possible. And I think it really, really works. They kind of like make their eyes really beady and narrow with CGI and kind of like, I guess, move the eyes a little bit closer together. It's really kind of cool the way it works. But the whole idea behind it is a bunch of vampires descend on this town in Alaska where, once, like at one point during the year, the sun will go down and it won't come back up for like 30 days. And that's like, hey, 30 days of feeding. Let's go and hang out there. And it's also about a bunch of residents of that town. I think it's called Barrow, trying to survive for those 30 days. And it's really, really good adaptation of the comic. There's a couple of times where the editing kind of, I don't know if something like a subplot got deleted and it kind of took away from this one character's story so that when he gets killed, his death doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's why I keep on wondering if this is like the unrated cut or not, because I know that there was like another version where that character's backstory is actually in the movie so that when they die, it makes sense. But as it is, it's a fantastic movie. I really recommend it. Don't watch the sequels. There have been plenty of sequels to this in comic book form. One of them I think is called Dark Days. And I do believe that was the name of the direct-to-video sequel, and it is poo-poo. It is garbage. Do not want. Next up we have 40-Year-Old Virgin. This is the unrated cut. This got the unrated cut, but not that. What the hell? Anyway. This brought back the R-rated comedies back in the early 2000s. I went and saw this with a friend. I was not very familiar with Steve Carell. Did not watch the Daily Show that he was a correspondent on. So I was not really familiar with him. So he was very new to me, and I had no expectations. The only thing I had seen by Judd Apatow was Freaks and Geeks. So I knew that. I liked that, which is the reason why I was willing to give this a shot. But comedies were kind of dead at that point in time, if I remember correctly. Like everything was PG-13 and was just like fart jokes and poop jokes and boob jokes and, stuff like that. And then this comes out and it's like a full-on R-rated sex comedy, and it was actually really funny. Like, I cracked up. That scene where Steve Carell goes to get waxed, and you can see Paul Rudd breaking in the background, like every time something happens to Carell. Like every time they rip one of those strips off and Steve Carell says some weird nonsense word, you see like Paul Rudd like start to smile, then he turns around real fast so the camera can't catch him cracking up. But it has a really good cast aside from him. It's got, like I said, Paul Rudd, Seth Rogen is in it. I can't remember the name of the guy that was on Weeds. It's going to piss me off that I can't remember these people's names. Elizabeth Banks. First time I ever saw Elizabeth Banks in a movie is in here. She plays the dirty girl who masturbates with the shower head in front of Steve Carell and grosses him out. Catherine Keener is in it. She's his main love interest. It's really, really funny. I do recommend it. Kevin Hart. First time I ever saw Kevin Hart in a movie, and he's trying to act like a thug, and it just doesn't work because of how short he is compared to everyone else that he's talking to. He's like, I come back, because he. I can't remember what to call it, Manoli or something like that. The guy that was on Weeds, he was the guy that grew all the pot, or wanted to grow pot. Then he eventually did grow the pot for everybody. Won't sell him a TV at the Best Buy store they work at for a discount. So he's like, I'm gonna come back here and pop a cap in you, and he's just like, yeah, try it, because he was a hoe for show. Now 300 goes there. Next up, we have, like I was saying before, I realized that I had screwed up the order somehow. I don't know how that happens. That happens every once in a while. I realize that I had put things back on the shelf like completely out of order, like a little brain fart. I talked about this in last month's stream, but I had actually bought this back in December. I was talking about this movie with a bunch of friends back in October, every Halloween. A bunch of friends, now two of them live in Madison, Wisconsin, and my buddy Jeremiah that I do my podcast with, we all get together and we during a weekend and just watch nothing but shitty horror movies. Normally we go to the Music Box of Horrors, which is this 24-hour movie marathon at a local theater. But the thing is, they've been selling out really early on once the tickets go on sale. Normally you could just walk up to the door and buy one there, right there. But they're selling out real fast and we can't seem to ever get tickets anymore. So now we've just been getting together and watching them at home. And I brought this movie up to them and no one had heard of it. So I looked it up and it turns out that there was this company, Massacre Video, who's a boutique company that releases a bunch of really, really low budget, no-name direct-to-video horror movies from the 80s and 90s. And they're remastering them for DVD. And I think a couple of them are on 4K. And I saw that it was there, and I was like, cool, I'll buy it, and then we can watch it next year at our little get-together. And I'm I said during that pickup stream, I'm going to say it again for those watching. Excuse me, got the belchies. That's what I get for drinking soda. The cover art is a little graphic. And that is a movie called 555. Yes, that is somebody getting their head cut off. What does the 555 stand for? Well, every 5 years, this hippie serial killer resurfaces and spends 5 days attempting to kill 5 different people. Then they go back into hiding. And I guess it's been happening for a while. And these 2 cops are on the trail of the killer. And the whole movie is about the final murder spree of this hippie killer kind of thing. The thing behind it is the movie was filmed with a home VHS video camera. It looks cheap. It looks cheesy. It looks like garbage. Every set in the movie looks like it's the exact same bedroom in someone's house that has just been, the furniture has just been moved around and a couple of different pictures hung up on the walls. It looks like it was made for about $2.15, or as Tinker will call it, $2.15. And the cover art that was on the VHS box that I used to see every time I would go to my local mom and pop video store was one of these oversized cardboard boxes, and it was an even more pulled back shot of this, where you actually see the hippie person, actually holding the head and this giant knife. They've zoomed in on just the severed head part for this cover. And I was always curious about it because I was I'm surprised that somebody actually thought that was a good idea to put that image on that cover. But apparently it worked because it was always out. So eventually I rented it because my friends, or one of my friends and I and my brother, used to do this stupid thing where we're real big fans of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And what we would end up doing was trying to emulate that with this thing we came up with called Titty TV. TITI, which stood for Trek Into the Idiocy TV. And what we would do is we would take my dad's VHS camcorder, aim it at our television in our basement, and we'd play a movie, and we would record that movie on that television, but we would keep sticking our hands into frame and talking shit about the movie as we watched it. And it was really, really fun, but we only made 2 or 3 episodes, and one of them was with this 555 movie, because I was like, hey, I've always been curious about it. None of us have seen it. Let's watch it as our pilot episode, and that's exactly what we did. Then we ended up doing Flash Gordon, and I want to say Battlestar Galactica, or it was some sci-fi. Oh, Metal Storm. That was the other one. Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jaredson. Anyway, it's not a good movie. But the back has questionable stuff on it as well. But I wanted to show it to my friend, so I picked it up. It wasn't expensive. It was $15 or something. So, and then you're probably going to ask, Chris, where's the first movie in this series? You only have the second one. I don't like the first one, but I do like the second one. I think the first one is one of the most overrated movies of all time. And what is that? This is 2010, the year we made contact. This is the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. I like Kubrick. It doesn't mean I have to like every one of his movies. I don't like A Clockwork Orange. I don't like 2001. I don't like Lolita. So I do like The Shining. I do like, what was the other one? Full Metal Jacket. But 2001 bores the piss out of me. It looks great. The music is great, that it's got all these classical compositions and stuff for the score and all that. It looks fantastic. But there's really nothing going on in that movie. It is just boring to watch as far as I'm concerned. I fall asleep every time I try to watch it, sometimes 2 or 3 times. But the sequel takes a more fast-paced approach, which I appreciate. It is based on an actual book, the sequel to Arthur C. Clarke's 2001. That is actually the year we made contact. This one is all about after Bowman disappeared at the end of the first movie. The Discovery, the ship that Bowman was on, is still in orbit of Jupiter. So a new crew goes to find the ship and try to bring it back. Turns out there's this whole plot in play with those monoliths and possibly trying to create new life on one of Jupiter's moons and all this weird kind of stuff. It is crazy, but I think it's really awesome. It has a great cast. It's got Roy Scheider. Helen Mirren is in it. Bob Balaban. It looks great. It sounds great. It's got some fantastic action sequences. A couple of them are actually pretty scary. Peter Hyams directed this. He ended up directing Time Cop and Sudden Death and Running Scared, the one with Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines. Outland. I think this is the closest to Outland we got. It looks like a couple of props might have been brought over from Outland to this. That Sean Connery outer space western, which I really liked. But I do prefer this one head and shoulders over the first. It's an easier movie to watch. The first one is for me, I would say it is patience testing. It's probably the best way I can describe it. And now we're getting into everything that starts with the letter A. See, look at this. I only have a handful of movies. I've talked about how many movies? 8 movies, and we're already more than a half an hour into this. So, Okay, so we'll start off with this unrated extended cut of The A-Team. This is the movie adaptation of the 80s TV show, which I used to watch, I will admit. I used to like it. I used to like it because I thought Mr. T was cool. I saw him in Rocky 3, and I was like, that guy is rad as hell. I would love to watch a TV show with him in it weekly, and I did. The movie's pretty rad. I like it a lot. Liam Neeson, Bradley Cooper, Sharlto Copley, who I've met in person and is actually a really nice guy, and Rampage Jackson. I'll play the main 4 characters, and the bad guys are not Stuart Wilson. Damn it, what's his name? Patrick Wilson. Stuart Wilson is the guy who's always the bad guys in, who was it? Marcus Zorro and No Escape and all that. Patrick Wilson from the Insidious movies. And Jessica Biel. Go figure. Really liked it. I went and saw this with not only my normal crew of friends that I go and see movies with on the regular, but I also saw it with a couple of people from work. And if I remember correctly, all of us walked out with smiles on our faces. I remember everybody really liking it. It was super fast-paced and fun. Yeah, there's some ridiculous stuff with a helicopter doing a corkscrew flip and all that. But I'm the cast is perfect. It's really entertaining. It's really fast-paced. The action scenes are great. And the acting ain't half bad either. I liked it a lot. And then when this came out, this unrated extended cut, I was like, cool, even more of that stuff that I liked when I saw this in the theater. And I'm here to tell you that don't do that. Don't watch that cut. It's boring as hell. It just drags everything out. Hannibal at one point is trying to get from point A to point B to rescue somebody. And on the way, he picks up B.A. Baracus. And in the movie, it's just kind of this real quick scene. But in this cut of the movie, you can watch either one on this. In the extended cut, they have this long conversation in the car, and it just ruins the momentum of that scene completely. It's look, I like character development and all, but not when it kills that whole scene. It just makes it boring and unwatchable. And that's what all the extended cut stuff is. It's just stuff that artificially lengthens these scenes and makes the movie, I would say, kind of unwatchable, and it ruins the movie. So stick with the theatrical cut. That's my recommendation. But then again, I say you do you. But what's his name? Carnahan. Joe Carnahan directed this. And that guy is fantastic. I don't, well, The Gray I wasn't a big fan of. I think he made The Gray after that. But outside of The Gray, every movie that Joe Carnahan's made, I've really been a big fan of. This one is another great movie to watch on Blu-ray 3D. I would normally separate these 3D Blu-rays into another video, but I got rid of a lot of them. So I don't have as many as I used to, so it wouldn't really be worth separating it. So I just have them all mixed in here. A lot of them are actually concentrated like right here in the A's, but you will see a lot less of them as I go through the alphabet in the other streams. But I'm talking about Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. So this is by Timur Bekmambetov. He made these 2 Russian sci-fi fantasy action films. One was called Night Watch. The other was called Day Watch. They're based on a series of books. There's actually like 5 books in that series, and I was hoping they would adapt all of them, but turns out 2 of them were expensive enough. So they didn't go any further. And then Bekmambetov moved over here to the U.S. and started making movies over here. He made Wanted with Angelina Jolie, and then he made this. And this is an adaptation of a book that I have read. I can't remember the name of the dude who wrote it, though. What was it on the back? Can't remember the name of the guy who wrote it. Seth Grahame-Smith. Yep, Seth Grahame-Smith. I read the book, and it's like one of those parody books where you take like a biography of somebody, and then you just insert all this weird detail, and it's all about him fighting vampires. Like his mom was killed by a vampire when he was a kid, and he always vowed vengeance. So when he wasn't running for president and all that, he was out hunting down the vampire that killed his mother with like this silver axe of his. And it is really kind of clever at times. Anthony Mackie is in it. I think this is the first time I ever saw Anthony Mackie before he joined the MCU. So he was really good in this. So I remember saying like he's a better actor in this than the guy who's playing the lead. The guy who's playing the lead, I can't remember his name either. Andrew something. Benjamin Walker. The director saw him play a young version of Abraham Lincoln in some stage play, and they're like, yeah, that guy, who I don't think had ever been in a movie before. And if he did, he was like doing like background work or something. And the thing is, like, he's not great. He doesn't have a whole lot of charisma. When he does the older version of Lincoln, I think it's better because then his like lack of charisma kind of works because now he's an old man. But like when he's playing the younger version of his character, he's just really kind of like Keanu Reevesing it up. He's just kind of monotone. But he's great at action scenes. I'll give him that. He's great at flipping that axe around and doing all this crazy stuff when his stunt double isn't doing it. And the action scenes are great. There's a really cool action scene that takes place like in an action movie that would take place like in modern day. It would be about like people running on top of cars during traffic. But in the movie, they're running over horses and cows in a stampede. And it's really, really cool. The vampire effects are pretty rad. The music is great by Henry Jackman. And this is one of those movies I wish I saw in the theater in 3D, but I didn't. I ended up just seeing it on home video and then ended up picking up the 3D version. And I'm glad that I kept this one because it's probably one of my favorites. It looks great in 3D. Not nearly as good as a lot of other ones that I have on 3D Blu-ray, but that one's great. Also has Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She is one of the most gorgeous women on the face of this earth. I am very jealous of Ewan McGregor. Next up, we have Action Jackson. So I picked this one up a couple months ago after Carl Weathers passed away. As far as I know, this is the only movie I have ever seen where Carl Weathers is the lead. Can I start over? No. You can see I've only talked about a handful of movies. But welcome, Peter. What's up? What's going on? I am totally in for the Mo Game Con Airbnb if that's where we go, or the house that we go with. This is the only movie I'd ever seen Carl Weathers star in as the lead. I know he was in a bunch of other stuff, but this is the only one that I've seen. And I remember liking it back in the day. I have not seen it recently. And I kind of expected this to shoot up in like price because Carl Weathers passed away. Normally when like a celebrity dies, like whatever works that they've been in before, be it like music or whatever, like jumps up in price and becomes real popular all of a sudden. Not with Carl Weathers. You know, he had a big resurgence toward the end with being on The Mandalorian and all. He even directed an episode of The Mandalorian. It was really good. Yeah, this is that new one that I've been using recently. I've been using it for like since December or January. It gets a wider shot too. Still, it films in 1080p, but unless I pay an extra $30 to StreamYard every month, it won't let me use it 1080p. So it's still broadcasting in 720, which is some bullshit. So, like I said, I saw this once back in the day. It's directed by the guy who did Commando and Come in Peace and Firestarter, the one with Drew Barrymore. And it's like your typical action movie. Carl Weathers plays a cop. I think it's in L.A., and he gets a name or a nickname, Action Jackson, because he always ends up having to chase someone down the street kind of thing. And it's got Vanity in it. She plays like a drug-addicted singer, no, not a hooker. She plays like a drug-addicted singer. And Craig, what's his name? Craig T. Nelson from Poltergeist, the father from Poltergeist, is the villain in it. He's like an evil land developer. And Jackson's been trying to take him down for years. Sharon Stone is in it too. She plays Craig Nelson's wife. But the big thing, the only thing that I remembered over the years from this movie, because like I said, I only saw it once, was this scene where Carl Weathers is standing shirtless, looked like he's covered in freaking baby oil. He's got a rocket launcher in his hand, and he is standing like on a balcony. He's been chasing this like bad guy. I can't remember who it was. It's just like a standard thug or something. And he chases him to the end of like this balcony area, and he's standing there and he's got the rocket launcher aimed at him. And he goes, I guess the guy had said something to him about barbecue during the chase scene. And Carl Weathers says, "Barbecue, huh? How do you like your ribs?" And then he fires the rocket launcher and blows them up. And that was the one thing I always remember from that movie, because that is a really awesome, cheesy line. So I wanted to snag this, hopefully before the price jumped up, and I got it for like $6 off of Amazon. So I definitely need to watch that again. Here's one of my guilty pleasure favorites. I know people that love this movie as much as I do. I know people that absolutely despise this movie. I love it because it's weird and quirky and different, and it has like this weird kind of documentary feel to it, and it also has this ad-lib kind of feel, like people are kind of in character, like the actors are in character, but they're not following the script. They're just kind of having conversations with the other characters in character, and it kind of got caught on tape kind of thing. But I absolutely love it. It has a freaking fantastic cast, and that is Adventures of Buckaroo Bonsai Across the Eighth Dimension. So this came out like in 86, I want to say. 1984. Wow, I was off. Peter Weller, one of the first things I ever saw Peter Weller in from RoboCop. It's got John Lithgow in it. It's got Doc Brown. Christopher Lloyd. You weren't even alive. You missed out, bro. Like I said, Christopher Lloyd, Ellen Barkin. It's on the cover here. Jeff Goldblum, Clancy Brown. I'm trying to think who else. Vincent Schiavelli, Dan Hedaya. God, there's like a ton of people in here who were like nobodies at the time this movie came out. And even though this movie was considered a huge bomb, everybody kind of went on to bigger and better things, thankfully, like Jeff Goldblum and all that. So essentially, it is like a comic book movie about Buckaroo Banzai, who is Peter Weller, and get this, he is a rock star, he is a mercenary, he is a neurosurgeon, he is a particle physicist. And at the beginning of the movie, he creates this item with this doctor friend of his called the oscillation overthruster, which he theorizes will allow him to pass through solid matter. And he attaches it to this car, and the opening of the movie is this test drive that he does where he actually drives a car through a mountain. But on the way through the mountain, he realizes that he is passing through the quote-unquote eighth dimension. where there's these beings called lectroids, not electroids, just lectroids, who are like these evil aliens that have attempted to take over the Earth like decades earlier and were thwarted. War of the Worlds by Orson Welles was what that was, according to this movie. And now he finds out that there are a bunch of lectroids that have been trapped on our planet for years. And when they learn that he has created this oscillation overthruster that it can allow them to go back home, they try to steal it from him. And it's absolutely crazy. Turns out there's red lectroids who are the bad guys. There's black lectroids who are good guys. They can all disguise themselves as human if they want. One of the aliens is actually trapped inside a human body, and that is John Lithgow's character, and he goes completely off the rails nuts. You want to see some of the funniest overacting in the history of film? John Lithgow in this movie. And it's hysterically funny. At least to me it is. And it's weird. It's like there's a possible reincarnation of Buckaroo Bonsai's dead wife in one subplot. And then there is the possible nuclear war subplot that's going on. It's a lot of things. Like I said, it feels like a comic book, and I absolutely love it. It is bonkers in the best way possible. It has one of the cheesiest synth scores you'll ever hear in a movie, but I love it. It's fun. It's really fast-paced. Like I said, it is weird, but weird in a good way. Jeff, I mean, like, you've got like this band that Buckaroo Banzai like travels with in a tour bus, but they're also like soldiers on the side. And like one of them, Jeff Goldblum's character, is also a neurosurgeon. That's how Buckaroo Banzai meets him and gets him to join the crew, is by when they're doing surgery side by side at one point in the beginning of the movie. But the rest of the time, Jeff Goldblum is running around wearing like an oversized cowboy hat, a red cowboy shirt, and like these furry like leg chap things on his legs. And it is like, what are you doing? One of the white guys in the group wears like ninja shoes randomly for no reason. It's the weirdest thing, but I love it. I absolutely love it. It is super fun and quirky, and I watch it at least once a year. It's also kind of got that whole James Bond thing going on, where at the end of each James Bond movie, at least the older ones, it would say like James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only or whatever, the title for the next movie. They did that here. Like Buckaroo Banzai will return in Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League. And that never happened. And I was sad, and I'm still sad. Turns out the same guy who wrote Big Trouble in Little China, the John Carpenter movie with Kurt Russell, wrote that movie. And he wrote a screenplay that actually crossed over Kurt Russell's character from Big Trouble in Little China and Buckaroo Banzai. And I have a copy of it that I printed out from the internet back in like the early 2000s. That is actually pretty decent. I wish they would have actually made that movie. Ninja shoes are for being silent, not when you're in a band and you're trying to make noise. But I like it. It's one of my favorites. There's another 3D movie. Like I said, you're going to see a bunch of 3D movies here. A lot of them are concentrated in the A's for some reason. That is The Adventures of Tintin. This is a Steven Spielberg movie based off of a French comic book that never really took off over here. I know there's been plenty of attempts to bring Tintin over to our shores, but I remember there was like a cartoon, and I think it was HBO for a little while about it, and didn't really get a lot of views. But like apparently Spielberg likes it, Peter Jackson likes it, Joe Cornish likes it, so they attempted to do this trilogy of films with the three of them. So Spielberg was going to direct the first one, Peter Jackson was going to direct the second one, and Joe Cornish was going to direct the third one. But the first one did not perform because, like I said, people in the U.S. don't know who the hell Tintin is. Well, he's like this little teenage reporter kid who gets involved in all these weird little adventures just trying to get a scoop, you know. And here it's about like pirates, I do believe, if I remember right. And I went and saw it in the theater because it's a Steven Spielberg movie, and he did like that cool motion capture kind of thing that Robert Zemeckis was doing, but did a lot better here. And I know Weta did all the makeup. The whole movie is CGI. It is really good-looking CGI at that. And it moves at a fast clip. There's a couple of shots that are like those never-ending shots, you know, the not where there's no cuts. There's a couple of action scenes where it's just one long shot where one of them follows an eagle through an action scene as it follows the action. It's really rad. I really like this one a lot, and I wish we did get those sequels. There was still talk about it at least 5 or 6 years ago, but I think COVID finally killed it dead. I like this one quite a bit. And this one is in 3D. I saw it in 3D in the theater. This is like, I think it was my birthday that year. I saw like 4 movies in one day, and this was one of them. And I loved it. Like I said, I wish we did get those 2 other sequels, but it wasn't meant to happen. Like I said, if they made that movie for the French market, it would have been fine. In the US, everyone's like, Tintin what? Isn't Rin Tin Tin the dog? What's going on? This one is another guilty pleasure of mine. I know it is not a good movie, but it's also kind of weird that whenever, at least in the 2000s, when a female actress or an actress is female, details, like an actress wins the Oscar for Best Actress at the Oscars, the following movie they make, their follow-up is always a huge flaming piece of shit. Happened with Angelina Jolie. She made Tomb Raider, and I freaking hate Tomb Raider. It happened with Halle Berry. She made Catwoman. And it happened with Charlize Theron. So she wins the Oscar for Monster. The next movie comes out is Aeon Flux. So this is based off of an MTV cartoon that started off on they had like a cartoon, a block of cartoons that were like shorts. Like every episode of Aeon Flux was like 5 minutes long. And it was about this female like secret agent trying to infiltrate this building and get to this guy named Trevor. And she would always die at the end of every episode. But the next episode would start and she's back alive again, trying again in a different way. And it was really kind of interesting and cool. And then they made it was so popular, they made an actual show about it that fleshed out why every time you see her die, she comes back again. And it's really, really rad. Well, they decided to make a live-action version of it in the early, mid-2000s or whatever it was. And while I will not say it is a good movie, I will say it is a fun movie. I do enjoy it. It is a piece of shit. It has like a nonsensical plot, but it looks great. The CGI is great. The action is great. It has creative use of CGI. I love that infiltration action scene with like the knife blades of grass and all that. And like one of the characters, what's her name, Sithandra, has like human hands for feet and all that. And like we still make fun of that character, Sithandra. We still make fun of that name with my friends. And it's like Charlize Theron looks thoroughly disinterested. It's like she made her movie for herself, which was, a monster. And she's like, now I'm making a dumb action movie to pay the bills. And like I said, she looks completely disinterested, but she looks great in it. I like it, but I don't like it at the same time. But I still haven't gotten rid of it because I do watch it every once in a while. I'm like, this sucks, but it's fun. And plus, I'm such a huge fan of the cartoon from MTV that I kind of like feel like I want it for the collection. The hands for feet girl is so cool. It's Sithandra. Here's a classic comedy, and I have stories about this. I still quote this with my boss at work pretty much once a week. And that is Airplane. This is one of the funniest movies I think I've ever seen. And the thing is, it's a parody of not only like all those airport movies that were coming out in the 70s, where it was always like, oh, we've got like the newest airplane, come off the assembly line, the new version of the Concorde or whatever, and it crashes in the ocean. And then it's about everyone trying to like survive in the ocean. It's like the Poseidon Adventure in a plane kind of bullshit. No, actually, this is a parody of a movie called 0 Hour. Do you like movies about... You ever been in a Turkish prison? And I have seen that movie, 0 Hour, and it is this movie done seriously. Exact same plot, exact same characters, exact same dialogue. This movie is basically 0 Hour, but making fun of itself. And me and one of my coworkers at work were watching it at his desk. It's actually on YouTube. It was at the time, and we were watching, and it is the exact same movie. This one just pokes fun at itself, and it was like crazy how funny it was. We were laughing at it and inserting the jokes from Airplane into 0 Hour because the 0 Hour movie is terrible. But this is awesome. It has so many funny puns and like wordplay jokes. So the place I work at currently, I worked there since 2011. It's a German-run company, And when I first started there, it was 95% German expats running the place, and there was only maybe like 5 or 6 Americans there, and I was one of them. So we all became chummy, and we started talking about like movies and differences between the movies in Germany compared to the movies in the US. And one of the guys starts quoting Airplane, but quoting it in this weird backwards kind of way. And it turns out it's because, he's seen Airplane plenty of times in Germany, but he's watching it in German. So he asked me if I had a copy of Airplane, because every time I would quote it, he'd be like, that doesn't sound right. I was like, well, because I'm watching it in English. You're watching it in German. Of course it's going to sound different. Like, they probably had to, like, change the way the joke works to work in German than compared to what's funny to us. So he goes, can I borrow your copy of Airplane to watch so I can compare the two? And I was like, yeah, fine. So I lent it to him, and he brings it back the next day, and he goes, it's not funny. German version funnier. So I'm like, well, what was different? And he goes, the whole Shirley joke. And I go, okay, in the US, it's like, Shirley, you can't be serious. And he goes, the doctor goes, I'm always serious, and don't call me Shirley. And over there, the way it works is kind of like, Shirley, you can't be serious. He goes, I'm a doctor. I'm always serious. And my name isn't Shirley. And I'm like, it's the exact same freaking joke, dude. It's just a couple of different words. And he goes, it's funnier over there. I'm like, whatever. I know a little German. He's sitting right over there. I love it. I watch this movie at least once a year. I do think the quote on the front is correct. One of the top 10 funniest movies ever made. It is so goddamn funny. Leslie Nielsen, who at that point in time when I saw this as a kid, I had only seen him in Forbidden Planet, which is like this really serious sci-fi movie from like the 60s, I think it is. 50s or 60s. And I'd never seen him be funny before until I saw this. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And next thing you know, you start seeing Leslie Nielsen in everything that has to do with comedy. All of a sudden he's in those Naked Gun movies and all that. It's nuts. Absolutely love it. Which brings us to Airplane 2, the sequel. The one that's funny, just not nearly as funny as that. Completely different people made this. Has most of the same cast. It still has Julie Haggerty and what's his name? Robert Hayes in it. What's his name comes back to Lloyd Bridges. But instead of having Robert Stack being like the top dog guy that's back at the airline terminal, it's William Shatner this time, and the whole movie is about a space flight, the first like space passenger flight to the moon. And William Shatner is the guy in the tower on the moon losing his freaking mind. And if you're a Star Trek fan, he pokes fun at Star Trek quite a bit. They have a bunch of props from Star Trek. There's usually in like I've seen it in Next Generation episodes. I've seen it in episodes of plenty of other non-Star Trek related shows. But there's always this like clear tube with like these red neon lights, and all it does is cycle. And it's got these two big like capacitor looking things on the sides holding it together. And you always just see this like red light cycling through this big long tube. And somebody is working on that in Airplane 2. And Shatner walks up and he goes, I'm sorry, sir, I can't get the lights to work in sequence. And Shatner goes, well, then get them to work out of sequence. It just cracks me up. It's funny. It's just not nearly as funny as the first one. I just still don't understand, though, why the musical score from this is stolen directly from Battlestar Galactica. It is just the exact same piece of music from the title of Battlestar Galactica, used over like the opening credits, the ending credits, and like an action scene in the middle. It's really, really weird. But I do like that one as well, but not as much as the first. You ever seen a grown man naked? Yep. One ticket to Chicago, please. Smoking, and the ticket is smoking. Would you like a pamphlet from the Church of Religious Consciousness? Here's a comedy that I am recommending to each and every person that's here. If you can find a copy of it streaming somewhere, I would highly recommend watching this immediately. It took me forever to find a copy of this on Blu-ray. This was one of those DVDs that I refused to get rid of until a Blu-ray came out. Found it last year, I think, from Kino Lorber. And it's made by... Is it? Sort of made by the same people that made Airplane. So... The movie that the guys that made Airplane and the Naked Gun movies did before Airplane was this movie called The Kentucky Fried Movie, which was basically just a bunch of like sketch comedy in a movie. It was like just nothing but small little sketches that made up a whole movie. Kind of like I'm trying to think, like Creepshow, but with comedy. And it's great. It's really, really funny. It was based on the Kentucky Fried Theater that the guys that made Airplane and John Landis had created, like, I want to say like in the early 70s or something like that. And then they made a Kentucky Fried movie, blah, blah, blah. And then John Landis, who worked on the Kentucky Fried movie with those guys, went on to do this. So it's kind of a spin-off of Kentucky Fried Movie, but it's also a bunch of like short little vignette sketch comedy like things that make up an entire movie. And it's called Amazon Women on the Moon. And if you have not seen this, go out and see it. You will not regret it. I was just talking about Forbidden Planet. So the idea behind this is some dude is he's like flipping channels on his television, and he's watching this movie that is kind of a parody of Forbidden Planet. And it's called Amazon Women on the Moon. And he keeps on switching channels in between, and he eventually gets stuck in the television. And every once in a while, his wife will change the channel, and you'll see like some commercial happening, and you'll see him walking through the commercial going like, Martha, let me out. But it's always somebody switching channels, and then the next time they switch a channel, it's another sketch. One of them has Arsenio Hall in it. That one's really, really great. One of them has Michelle Pfeiffer in it. One of them has Robert Stack from Airplane playing himself from Unsolved... Oh, no, sorry, not Robert Stack. Henry Silva is playing Robert Stack in an Unsolved Mysteries type of show, but it's called Bullshit or Not. And that episode that he's in is him talking about was completely dead serious. And I think I was talking about this when I was streaming Rift Tracks, the game, last Friday. Henry Silva like looks dead at the camera and says full like complete deadpan. He's like, was the Loch Ness Monster really Jack the Ripper? And then here's an overdramatic reenactment of one of his murders. And you see this like hooker in Victorian era England like walking down the street, and you see this big shadow go across. She goes, "Oh, governor, you're a big one." And then they show a full-size Loch Ness Monster, but it's wearing like a gentleman's coat and a hat. And it goes like, "Hey, baby." And look on his face like, "Hey, baby." And she goes, "You want to go in the alley and do something?" And he goes, and then she goes, "Well, let's go." And then she like grabs his cloak and starts dragging. And you see that he's like actually on like a wheelbarrow, and you hear the wheels like going. And then they get back there and goes, "Ooh, you're a big one." And then, get murdered. And then you see Henry Silva walk back out, and he's just like, "Bullshit or not? Did I take this job for a quick buck?" It's really, really funny. I highly recommend it. Like I want to say there's probably like 30 sketches in here. I really like it, and I was super thrilled when I found a high def version. I need to watch that again. I might watch it tonight. Got these, I think, at the end of last year. Kino Lorber, who actually released Amazon Women on the Moon, released. Like, I'm a huge fan of Canon. What is it? The Canon Group, I guess, is their official title. They did the Masters of the Universe movie that came out in the 80s, Life Force, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja, Ninja 3: The Domination, Cyborg, Superman 4. They were like these schlock guy, these two schlock guys from Jerusalem, I think, Jerusalem. Was it Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, and they were making like really low budget movies. They made the break-in movies, the breakdance movies that were real popular in the early 80s. They were like make a movie for like $500,000, and the movies ended up grossing like $20 million, and they were like making a huge amount of profit. So like they kept on like just pumping movies out. You would see like 3 Canon movies pop up in a year, sometimes 4 or 5, because they're just cranking this shit out. They made both break-in movies in the same year. So the ninja craze was big in the 80s. You had Enter the Ninja, and Revenge of the Ninja especially, which they ushered in. So they decided to keep going with that, and they made these American Ninja movies. There's 2 of them. You got American Ninja 1 and 2. And I saw both of these at the Dollar Theater. My mother and my father would never want to take us to see movies like this, quote unquote schlock, at a full price theater. They always had to wait for the Dollar Theater just in case it really sucked. Like that's how I saw the break-in movies. That's how I saw most of the movies released by Canon in the theater. But yeah, Michael Dudikoff, one of the most unconvincing white guy ninjas ever. So he's like a military dude who just so happened to train to be a ninja when he was in Japan. Ends up having to fight ninjas that are trying to infiltrate the government, if I remember that's what it was about. It's been a long time since I've watched these. I saw this one not too long ago because we watched this for my podcast. The movie is starting, and this one is like, cool, we'll take what the first one had, even though the first one was kind of crazy. We'll take that and we'll quadruple it. We'll just make it absolutely crazy. There was a character in here, or an actor in this movie, that has what we said was the longest neck in the history of necks. Like, his neck was like, you look at mine, his neck started here, and his neck ended like up here, where my eyes are. That's how long this dude's neck was. And every time he would show up, we would start calling him Mecha Neck from He-Man. And if you listen to the episode of the podcast, every time he show up, we go click, click, click. But yeah, they're just crazy, stupid action movies that are very low budget, but they're really, really fun. Michael Dudikoff, he teaches acting now, but he was never that good of an actor to begin with. He's always like real kind of just like another guy with no charisma. But he looked good, which is, I guess, why he was getting all the jobs. I don't know. They're fun. They're not great or anything, but I have a lot of nostalgic memories of those two movies because, like I said, theater, and we were heavily into like the whole ninja craze back in the 80s. Here's another. You're gonna a couple of three 3D movies in a row. Yeah, 3 3D movies in a row. Okay, so here's one that I have not gotten rid of, and that is Amityville 3D. I had to get this from Spain because this was never released over here in 3D unless you wanted to buy a very out of print and very expensive box set from, I do believe, Screen Factory that had like all of the original, I think it was like the original 3 or 4 Amityville movies in it. And I don't like the Amity movies like at all. I think all of them suck, including this one. This one is terrible. But I was always curious about the 3D because I remember watching this on cable back in the day all the time because this one was rated PG, I want to say. Yeah, this is rated PG. How? I don't know. But like, it was always on in the middle of the day. And if it was on in the middle of the day on cable, it was okay with my parents, even though we weren't allowed to watch R-rated horror movies. But I remember watching this when I was a kid and going like, I wonder what this looked like in 3D because there's so much stuff like poking you in the eyeballs in this. It's always something jumping at you. So I was really curious. So I actively went searching for it, found the only place it was released separately like this was in Spain. Luckily, it's region free. And I watched it in my PSVR. And you know what? It actually kind of works, especially for like one that was released in the 80s. A lot of the ones in the 80s, I found when you watch them in the theater for some reason, they didn't work great. But on home video, I don't know if they were tweaked or somehow before they were released on home video, but they work a lot better in the PSVR. I don't know what they looked like on a actual 3D television with the glasses, but in the PSVR, like this, Jaws 3, I'm trying to think what else. Metal Storm, Treasure of the Four Crowns, Coming at Ya. Trying to think what else is in there. Friday the 13th Part 3. They all look great in the PSVR, but like I saw, what was it? In 3D, Jaws 3D in the drive-in in 3D, and it looked like shit in 3D. I did not get any of the crazy effects, except maybe like the shark bullet thing at the end where he comes right at the screen and crashes through that window. That was probably the only time I think the 3D worked, but on home video, it looks great. So I was surprised that this actually worked. The movie is still terrible. It does have like a really young Lori Loughlin, from Full House in it. And Meg Ryan. I think this was like one of Meg Ryan's first big movies. But it's just the same thing. Haunted house. But for some reason, they retcon a bunch of the stuff that happened in the first 2 movies. And it's like there's a demon that lives in the sump pump in the basement. There's like a well in the basement, but it looks like what you would put a sump pump in. And for some reason, like there's a demon like living in it. And it's just really, really dumb. There's like a bunch of things with flies. Some of the things with flies are kind of cool in the movie. But it's always just something just randomly like poking you in the eyeball for no reason. But it looks cool. I think the part that works the best, though, is the beginning of the movie. There's the main character is like one of those people that debunks haunted houses and people that claim that they're psychics and stuff like that. He always goes to like a seance or something to see what kind of bullshit they're trying to pull. And at the beginning, there's like a seance going on. There's this like floating like sphere of energy that is going around the room while this seance is happening. And in 3D, it looks great. It looks really, really cool. And it turns out it's like a guy wearing a completely black suit so you can't see him. He's got like a stick with a big cotton ball with a light inside of it on a string that he's like moving around the room to make you think it's a spirit. It's really kind of funny. But that scene actually works pretty well, but it's a piece of shit, but it works in 3D. From Red, not from Full House. Yeah, because it's Aunt Becky. Aunt Becky. She's doing the ass sliding. I would assume that the reason it didn't really work in the drive-in was it was too dark. And the aspect ratio was wrong. The movie was shot in 235:1, but whenever you go to the drive-in, the screens were always in that 185:1, like the size of a standard HD television. So some of the information was probably lost because of that. And like I said, it was too dark. Screen isn't bright enough to make it work. So like I don't remember any of the 3D really working very well. So when I watched it in my PSVR for the first time, I was like, okay, now this is what I wish I saw back then. It would have probably scared the literal crap out of me. I probably would have shit myself. That is the movie that caused my fear of sharks and the ocean. And then 2 more 3D movies. We got 2 of the Ant-Man movies, 2 of the 3 Ant-Man movies. This one is the OG, the original, and we have a Korean. Oh, this isn't Korean. This is from Canada. A Canadian 3D Blu-ray of the sequel, Ant-Man and the Wasp. I didn't bother with the third one. Korea is usually the place where I would get 3D Blu-rays of the movies that never got a 3D release over here. For some reason, 3D is super popular in Korea. Every 3D Blu-ray I've ever bought from them has been region-free, and it looks great. So, like, they stopped at one point, too. Like, I want to say it was around the time of Avengers Endgame, I want to say, is when they kind of, like, started to pull back on that kind of stuff. So, anyway, I absolutely had no faith in this movie when I saw it in the theater. I was like, Ant-Man does not sound like a great character. What's his superpower? He can talk to ants. Like, same kind of thing that everyone was saying about Aquaman. What's so cool about Aquaman? All he does is talk to fish. No, he actually does more than that. Ant-Man does more than that. He can actually shrink and all that. And I did not understand the power of the Rudd. Paul Rudd is great in these movies. Like, you can tell he is having like a blast playing a superhero. He probably never thought in a million years that, you know, all the stuff that he'd been in back in the day, starting off with like Halloween 6, was eventually going to lead him to the MCU. And you can tell he is super cool, you know, or super excited about being in this movie, realizing what a super cool project he's in. And I think it's like infectious. I watch it and I just laugh and I smile, and they're super entertaining. It's a kind of a joke because it has to do with the person who shrinks, but it's like a small scale action movie. It isn't some world ending thing that's going to happen like in most of these Marvel movies. And what happens in the finale? What's the big final action scene? It's 2 guys who are the size of a penny fighting on top of a child's like desk where there's a train set. And that's where the fight happens. But because they're tiny and there's this like toy train going around the table, it looks like they're on in the middle of a field when there's a big train going around them and all that. And it's really, really funny the way it works. It was a clever action scene. I thought it was great. And then you have the sequel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I like more than the first one. I like the addition of Ghost, introduced her to the MCU. She's now going to be in Thunderbolts, and brings out what's his name, Van Dyne. I can't, not Hank Van Dyne, his wife, Michelle Pfeiffer's character. And you even have Walton Goggins. Anything can't talk. Walton Goggins. Anything he is in, I will watch, because he's really good at being funny, and he is really good at being a son of a bitch. And it's just cool. Hell yeah. What's up, Retro Coop? This one was just more of what made the first one so much fun, except in this one goes off of the whole Giant Man thing that happened in Captain America Civil War. So Ant-Man can now shrink and grow to 20 times his size. Doesn't ask for orange slices, though, like he did in Captain America, which I thought was kind of stupid. But it's a fantastic movie. I want another one. It's just a really fun, the thing I like the most about these movies when you compare them to most of the other movies in the MCU is not only do they kind of contained, there's that scene with Falcon in this one. This one doesn't really do any of that kind of stuff where it's like connected to the rest of the MCU, except the after credit scene where the whole Thanos snapping thing catches up with them. But like these are just caper movies, like superhero caper movies. It's like Ocean's 11 with superheroes in them, and they're just really, really fun. And that's the reason why I'm not a fan of the third movies, because it lost that caper feel to just do this whole like, hey, we're setting up everything that's going to happen in Phase 5, guys. I think it kind of ruined what made the Ant-Man movies fun, was like they were kind of separate from everything else until like an Avengers movie would happen. And that whole like, we've got to go and steal something kind of thing. You know, that was what was great. The third one, like I saw in the theater, and I was like, this, like, I don't know how I can not like an Ant-Man movie as much as this, but this is bad. I watched it again on Disney Plus, and I was like, I still don't like it all that much, but it's not as bad as I remember it being. But it's like Avengers 2, which I'll talk about in a bit. It's like the second Avengers movie. It doesn't feel like a movie to me. It feels like it's just setting up things that are going to happen in later movies. I was not enjoying that. Next up, we have crazy-ass Mel Gibson's movie Apocalypto, which I thought was actually pretty rad. I saw this in the theater with a friend of mine. We had no expectations. He had done this after, The Passion of the Christ. And there's no English-speaking characters in this movie. No one speaks English. Everybody's speaking like what would, I guess, have been Aztec language back in the day. And it's basically like an extended chase film. It's a tribe of, I want to say Mayans, maybe. Mayans, a bunch of them get kidnapped, and they're taken to like this pyramid where they're going to get sacrificed, and one of them escapes, and it's his trip back to his tribe. And it has some of the most violent shit. When that dude's face gets ripped apart by that panther, holy shit. You just see that guy's jaw go. There's a birthing scene in this where like a character who is giving birth back at the tribe or whatever, she gives birth underwater, and she basically shoots a baby out of her hoo-hoo like it's a bullet. And they show it like that, too. They basically show her underwater. Next thing you see this baby just go pew right out of her. This is called Apocalypto. Like I said, it is absolutely fantastic. It is just nonstop action once it gets going. Graphic violence. It's like Mel Gibson had some really cool ideas before he lost his goddamn mind. He got like, what, $80 million to make a movie where no character speaks English. It features no American actors. Everyone is like descended from Mayans or whatever. Like everyone is like from Mexico, descended specifically from Mayan, or they come from Mayan heritage or whatever. He looked for people to cast in the movie that were just like that. And I just think it's pretty rad. Like it's a really unique movie, and I did not expect to like it. And when it was over, me and my friend were just kind of like, I don't think we're ever going to see a movie like that ever again. And we haven't. Here's one of my favorite horror movies, April Fool's Day. Absolutely love this one. If you've never seen it, I'm not going to spoil it for you. There's the original artwork. We actually watched this for my podcast. The movie's starting. So this is made by the people who make the Friday the 13th films. This was made in like 1986 or 7, I do believe. And it was kind of like hoping that it would get the same kind of crowd of the Friday the 13th fans, and it kind of did not perform very well. The thing about it is it's very meta, and I don't think people were expecting that. So it has your typical horror movie setup. A bunch of friends from college are invited to one of their classmates' their vacation house that is like really isolated. You have to take a boat, like a trolley, to get there, isolated kind of thing, for like a weekend of partying and sex and drug use and drinking and that kind of thing. And then one by one, people start dying. And you think it's like a typical Friday the 13th movie kind of setup, and it is. But as the movie starts going on, like keeps on going, you start noticing things. And it's not really something you would notice on the first viewing. It's like on repeat viewings, you will start noticing things that don't add up. And then at the end of the movie, when all is revealed, it's like, holy shit, how did I not see that coming? That is awesome. And it's a unique spin on a slasher. I call it the non-slasher. It is really fun. The characters are all really likable. Some of them are a little like that obnoxious, oversexed type that you see in like the one I can quote the most is like from Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Crispin Glover just wanting to get laid all the time. One of the characters is kind of like that in the movie, but in a funny way. He's got a girlfriend in the movie that's there with him, so it's like they're doing this to each other. All they want to do is like bang like rabbits. But it is really funny. It has a great cast. There's a bunch of people that you would recognize from other horror movies. You got Deborah Foreman. You got Amy Steele, who was the final girl on Friday the 13th Part 2. Clayton Rohner, who was in that Good and Evil TV show. The guy that played Biff in Back to the Future is one of the characters in here. Griffin O'Neill. It has a great cast, and like I said, the twist ending is fantastic. I absolutely love it. I want to say if you're going to find it streaming, it'll probably be on Paramount Plus in the U.S. If not, I'm pretty sure you could find it on like Amazon. It is very cool. It is like really clever. I like it a lot. You think it's one thing, and it turns out to be something totally different. So I remember my brother and I got into an argument over this one. I liked it. He hated it. But I thought it was a really kind of clever thriller, like paranoia thriller movie. And it's called Arlington Road. It has Jeff Bridges and Tim Robbins and Joan Cusack in it. So Jeff Bridges plays a teacher at a local college who teaches like what is it, like government history kind of thing? Or I can't remember what kind of history teacher he is, but his wife died in a terrorist bombing, and he's always kind of had this like thing about that, like he could possibly snap if somebody brings it up to him kind of thing. So he's kind of got a bad reputation. Then a new neighbor moves into town, and like the opening of the movie is a kid walking down the middle of the street in the neighborhood that Jeff Bridges lives in, and as he's walking, you start seeing like blood hitting the side or the pavement that the kid's walking on. And they kind of show a shot of the kid's face, and his eyes are all sunken in, and he's just kind of like dazed. And then you see Jeff Bridges driving down the street, and he sees the kid in the middle of the street and like walks out, and he's like, "Kid, get out of the street," moves him to see what's going on. And it turns out the kid blew his thumb off. And he's like, he's holding his hand like this, and his thumb is just shooting blood. And the kid is in shock. So he takes the kid to the hospital. Turns out this kid is the son of his new neighbor that he hasn't met yet. The kid was fucking around with fireworks and blew his thumb off. And this is what this is like the event that they use to like introduce the characters to each other. And they become friends. But then as the movie goes on, turns out that like Jeff Bridges has been targeted by Tim Robbins and his wife, who are like anarchists. And they know that Jeff Bridges has this reputation and this hatred of the U.S. government because of what happened with his wife being killed in that explosion. And they kind of use it against him to get away with doing what they need to do. They're using him as the scapegoat. And it's really, really cool. It's like this cool paranoia thriller, and I really like it. It's a great soundtrack. Did Biff throw a knife? Yes, he did. Him and Griffin Dunn have this game where they throw like a switchblade into the ground, and you have to stand a specific amount of inches away from the knife, and you have to try to bend over without falling over to pick that knife up. And they do a joke where they argue about if one of the throws was fair or not, and but Biff throws the knife at Griffin Dunn and it hits him in the stomach. And everyone thinks that he's going to die because he got stabbed in the stomach. It turns out it was like a gag that they were playing. They had like a blood pack in his chest and like, I got you. Yeah, it was random. Yeah, great. It's like, seriously, watch it. It's fun. It's like that kind of shit I'm talking about. It's really good. Here's another movie that you either like it or you hate it. I love it. I thought it was cool counter-programming to another big alien invasion movie that came out the same summer, and that is The Arrival. Yeah, it stars Charlie Sheen. This came out the same summer as Independence Day. So that one's about aliens coming to blow up the planet until they can take over, kill all the humans, take over the planet. This one is another alien invasion movie, but they're doing it through climate change. And Charlie Sheen gets wind of it. He's like what do they call him? Like a radio scientist or whatever. He like listens to radio transmissions from space, and he finds out that there are transmissions coming from Earth to space from aliens contacting their home planet. And there's also like this environmental thing going on where like record temperatures in areas that usually were pretty moderate. And it turns out the aliens are slowly raising up the temperature of the Earth to a temperature that works for them, that they feel comfortable in, until we die off and they can just inherit the planet. And it's actually a really well-made movie. David Twohy did this. He did Pitch Black and the Riddick movies. He wrote too. I think he wrote Jurassic Park or did rewrites on Jurassic Park or something like that. It's really a pretty cool, like, it has a low budget, has some CGI in it. But it was, what's the name of that company? Artisan, or I can't remember the company that released this. It was like not Vestron. It was the same company that released, the second Warlock movie. I can't remember the name of it. Whatever. It was made pretty low budget, but it's like a really cool, like, diamond in the rough kind of movie. And I was glad that I was able to catch it in the theater before it disappeared. I only think this lasted for like 2 weeks, but it made decent money because it was a low budget. That it got a sequel that went direct to video called The Second Arrival. Don't watch it. It is a horrible piece of shit. This one is actually kind of cool and creative and interesting. I like that one quite a bit. I'm just glad I picked up the set. There's a double disc set out there that has part 1 and 2 in it. I do not want that at all. I do not want that movie in my house. It is horrible. Here is one of John Carpenter's first, one of his, like, the first couple of movies he made. I think this is like the second movie he made. That is Assault on Precinct 13. He made this after Dark Star. Dark Star he made as like his final for film school. This was like the first movie he made after film school. This is pretty fantastic. He's a big fan of Westerns, and this is essentially an urban Western. So there's a bunch of gang members just running through the streets, like just driving around looking for trouble. A father takes his daughter to get some ice cream. They see an ice cream truck on the side of the road. They pull over. The dad goes to talk to somebody while the daughter gets ice cream. And while she's getting ice cream, the gang members show up and shoot her dead. Little kid. Shoot her dead. Dad sees it, goes after the drug lords or the gang members, kills a couple of them, and they like wound him, I want to say, and he ends up running to this police station that he sees that is in the process of being shut down. And they're like, "We have no cops here to help you. There's like 3 cops on duty. Everyone else is at the new precinct. We're closing this place. All we have is a bunch of file clerks and like 3 cops." And he's just like, "Well, you're the cops. You're supposed to help me." And then the gang members just swoop down onto this building in mass. Like, we're talking like 100 gang members against like 6 people and a bunch of prisoners that are there just because the bus that was transporting them to a prison broke down and they happen to be in the area of this precinct. And it's actually a pretty cool movie. It's like, you know, what is it called? Rio Bravo, I think, is the Western, where it's like a bunch of bad cowboys trying to get into the sheriff's station or whatever in the Wild West town or whatever kind of thing. It's a whole thing. It's the same thing, but just done as like an urban movie. And it's really kind of cool. I like it a lot. It's a great cast, bunch of nobodies. But the lady that ended up playing, what's her name? Nancy in Halloween, the first Halloween, ends up is in this as well. She was married to John Carpenter, I think, at the time. But yeah, Darwin Johnson, he ended up being in The Fog when they made that. Next, Austin Stoker plays the lead, like the interim sheriff. It's a great movie. I like it a lot. Oh, no. Yeah, Carpenter's one of my favorite filmmakers. So I want to have all of his movies on home video at some point. I don't know which, depending on which format, I don't care. As long as I have them. But that's Assault on Precinct 13. This I saw in my high school film study class. And it's one of those things where, what was the teacher thinking showing us something like this in class? Like, I remember hearing that the teacher that I had for film study, like the previous year that from when I took it, they were showing like Star Wars. I think they watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, Back to the Future, that kind of stuff. But they weren't watching them just to like watch them. They were discussing them as they were watching them, and all that, and talking about what the compositions were meant to represent and stuff like that. You know, film talk. When I took the class, he decided it was gangster time. We watched The Godfather. We watched this. We watched Scarface. We watched a bunch of shit we probably should not have in high school, but I was not complaining. One of the gangster movies that he showed us was At Close Range. That stars Sean Penn and Christopher Walken, where like Christopher Walken is like a local gangster. Penn is his son, and Penn starts to kind of go up against his dad like kind of renounces what his dad does, and his dad ends up trying to kill him and his friends because there's a possibility that they're going to talk to the cops, and it's like how could you do this to me, Dad? Kind of thing. It's actually really, really good. Our teacher, when he showed this to us, there are some graphic ass killing scenes in this movie, like scenes where people are getting gunned down. One of them in particular is pretty brutal. And I remember, like, when it was over, we kind of looked at the teacher. We're like, "Are you going to get in trouble for showing this to us? Because if somebody goes to the principal and says, 'Hey, he showed us this movie where there was like blood flying all over the damn room,' like, is he going to get fired?" Kind of thing. He had to have had all of these movies approved by the board or something in order to show them. But I don't know. Some of them were just kind of like, I don't know how I got away, especially Scarface. Every other word in that movie is fuck. But whatever. And I ended up really, really liking this to the point where I wanted to own a copy of it. It's got great performances. I think it was nominated for some Oscars. Madonna does the theme song. Yeah, I have The Crow 4K pre-ordered. I have True Lies already. Paprika I've seen. I don't know if it's coming out in 4K over here, but from what I remember, I liked Paprika. Next up, we have one of my favorite, like, surprise diamond in the rough kind of movies. Hang on a second. The slip is coming out. And I remember I bought this. Well, I rented it from the Redbox originally because I did not get a chance to see it in the theater. Here in Chicago, it came and went real fast. I remember reading about it, like the lead up to it being released, and I was like, that actually sounds kind of cool. I want to go see that. Barely got a release here. And I remember one day I went to the local Walgreens, and they have a Redbox in there, and they had it. I rented it, really liked it, ended up buying a copy of it, showing it to my girlfriend at the time, and saying, like, look, you need to check this out. And we both said at the same time, the lead in that movie is going places. He's gonna be a big star someday. And that is Attack the Block. So this Joe Cornish, the guy who helped to make the Tintin movie that Peter was talking about, this was his first, I think it was like his directorial debut, but he had been a writer for a while, and it's about an alien invasion on like a real small scale in like these projects in the UK, like in London. And the thing is, like, a female of this species of alien crash lands like near this project and dies, but a bunch of male aliens follow because they're supposed to start mating, I guess. And they can smell the corpse, but they don't care. They just want to bang it. So the male alien, like the female alien, basically is like this big, and it looks like a big possum. The male aliens, on the other hand, are like 5 feet tall. They walk on all fours. They're like gigantic evil apes, and you can't see them because they are completely black. Like they reflect no light. It's almost like they absorb the light. So if you're standing in the middle of a dark room, you would not see it standing there unless it opened its mouth because its teeth glow blue. That's the only. They don't even have eyes. They just smell. So unless it opens its mouth, you would not know it was there. And it's really cool, like the effect that they used to like make that like reality. That was really, really cool the way they did that. I don't know if they use CGI to enhance it or what. And it looks like a dude in a suit when you see it. But like the complete blackness, like not reflecting any light at all, is really rad when you see it in action. And the lead of this movie is John Boyega, who you might know from the Star Wars sequels, who played Finn. And we both said, like at the same time, we're like, John Boyega, he is going places. He's going to be a big star because he barely talks in this movie, but he gets across everything you need to know just by facial expressions. And like that takes skill. Like if you can basically tell what you're feeling, what you want to say to somebody without really saying it, just by looking at them and just like facial expression, like you're a master. We're both like, that guy's everything he does is great in this. So yeah, we absolutely love it. It is funny. It's funny. It's got a lot of action in it. It's got a great soundtrack. I can't remember the name of the band that did the music. There was like it's a techno band that did the score for this. Basement Jacks. They're like a pretty big techno band from the UK. They did the whole Queen thing from Flash Gordon and composed the music for it, and it's great. Yeah, you can see what the female alien looks like right there. It just looks like a big, like an opossum. It's great. The characters are funny. The crew that hangs out with John Boyega's character, they're all really funny. They all have really cool personalities. They're really likable. One of them's kind of annoying because he keeps on saying bruv. Like every other word is bruv. But I really, really like it. And there's these two little kids that live in the projects with them who like are always outside playing like guns and stuff with each other. And like it was almost like they saw the whole alien invasion thing coming, because when it starts to happen, it's like they were prepared because they're always playing guns. And you think that they're trying to attack these aliens with like these giant like squirt guns that they have. I can't remember what those big squirt guns that you have to pump. I just made like a jacking off motion that I didn't mean to. I can't remember what those super soaker type squirt guns are. No, they loaded them with gasoline and set them all on fire. It's super funny. And then the next 4 movies are all in 3D. But I don't really think I need to talk about these at any great length. So we've got the OG Avatar. So I do own this in 4K. The 4K, I bought the 4K set, the big box set that they released. And I remember reading that this was I can't freaking talk. I read that was supposed to be released with a 4K of the movie, not only just the theatrical cut, but like the 2 other cuts. There's a theatrical cut, a special edition cut, and like a collector's edition cut. And also the movie on Blu-ray with all those cuts. And also a 3D Blu-ray with just the theatrical cut on it, because I don't think they bothered with the extended cuts to transfer that over to 3D. But they didn't, because I was expecting to get rid of this, so I held on to it because I did not think that this had great 3D when I saw it in the theater. It was all just layering and like, like the background, like looking like it's far away compared to where the characters are interacting in the foreground and all that kind of stuff. And I was kind of used to the whole everything poking you in the eye all the time and bullets and shit just streaming at your face. So when I saw this, I was just kind of like, yeah, the 3D just didn't do anything for me. I didn't really care. But now I realize that it's all just about that like immersion feeling that was what James Cameron was going for, because it definitely comes through in the second one more than the first one, at least for me. I still have not watched this on my PSVR. I saw it in the theater in 3D twice. So I'm going off of that. And even in IMAX 3D, it didn't feel awesome to me, like the way everyone was making such a big freaking deal about it. But I did find this dirt cheap at a secondhand store, so I decided to keep it. I do not have a 3D TV. I watch everything on in my PSVR, my PlayStation VR headset, because that can play 3D Blu-rays, or you can watch 3D Blu-rays in that. And I know it sounds weird to watch a movie in that headset, but after the first 5 minutes, you don't even realize it's on your head anymore. But I also have the 4K box set of this, the sequel to Avatar, and that does not have the 3D version of the movie in it either, which kind of sucks. So I have the 3D Blu-ray of Way of the Water and the 4K box set, because this is the one where the 3D really blew my freaking mind. So I went and saw this opening weekend at the local 4DX theater that's right down the street from me. 4DX is not only 3D, but the chairs move depending on what's going on in the movie. There is smells that are pumped into the theater. There are lighting effects. They pump smoke in there. They will shoot you in the face with water. And believe me, we got wet watching this movie in more ways than one. The thing is, with this one, it was all about transparencies. So a lot of the computer screens in the movie are like these transparent like screens that you could see through. And the effect in 3D of seeing somebody through one of those screens on top of there being like information being on the screen too. Me and my brother are both like, what the hell? That is amazing. Like, and on top of that, just the 3D in general was fantastic. Way better than what I remember the first movie looking like. The 3D in part 2 is like top notch. It's like it set a new standard, but nobody really cares about 3D all that much anymore. So I don't think anybody's really trying to do anything with it. Except for James Cameron. I'm pretty sure part 3 is going to look like pretty awesome too. But had to have this because of that 3D experience. But seeing that in 4D with the moving chairs and all that, my brother and I both looked at each other when the movie was over and we were like, I think I have a spinal injury. I don't know if from what I understand, the PSVR 2 does not display the 3D Blu-rays. Only the PSVR 1 for the PS4. Somebody in one of my streams told me that his PSVR 2 won't play the 3D Blu-rays. So I've still got my PS4. I've still got my PSVR. The PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 5 will play them, but it won't. You can't watch it in the PSVR 2. And then the last two movies I have are in 3D as well, and those are the first two Avengers movies. So I do have, yeah. So the original Avengers, I was super looking forward to this. I was beyond excited. I liked aside from Iron Man 2 and now that I think about it, out of the 5 movies that led up to this coming out, you had Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Incredible Hulk, Captain America, and Thor. I liked the first Iron Man. I thought the first Iron Man was fantastic. I still do. Incredible Hulk, I thought it was really fun. Way better than the one we got in the early 2000s with Eric Bana. I thought it was really fun. I still do. Iron Man 2, could not stand it. I thought it felt really thrown together and rushed. And I was really pissed off that in the end it came down to another bad guy in another Iron Man suit. Like, mine's better than yours kind of bullshit. And I was just like, no, I did not really like part 2. Thor, really liked Thor. I had no expectations for it. I really didn't know anything about the character other than like the whole Norse mythology part of it. I didn't really know anything about him as a comic book character. And I thought the trailer looked okay. The movie ended up, I thought, being pretty fantastic. Captain America was not a fan, like at all. I thought it was like the worst of the Marvel movies we got in that first phase. Why? Because I don't like the director, Joe Johnston. I think he's kind of a company hack. He's like a studio hack. Like, if you can't get someone to direct the movie, if no one wants to sign on, just get Joe Johnston. He'll do it. He'll do anything. He's like Mikey from those Life commercials. And all the action movies were stolen from other movies. Like, a lot of them were stolen from Indiana Jones movies. They took place in the same time period. That whole motorcycle chase scene was right out of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And I just could not get into it. I really did not enjoy it. But I did like the fact that all of these movies were leading up to like this, like where all those characters got together. And while the first 10 minutes I think are really awkward, like title scene, like when you see the Avengers title pop up on screen, that whole like action scene, pre-title action scene, I think it's really awkward and kind of weird and shot very strangely. After that, I think it takes off, and it is absolutely fantastic. I thought it was a great sum up to all of Phase 1, introduced the whole Thanos thing, didn't know who the hell he was because I did not read a lot of comics. I knew of him, but I didn't know anything about him. And I thought it was great that it was setting things off in like a real fun way, and I could not wait to see where everything went. So Joss Whedon became like everybody's favorite geek at that point in time. Now he's a piece of human shit when you hear about all the crap he was doing during the Justice League reshoots and how he treated people on the set of Buffy. And of course, when the sequel's coming out after the end of Phase 2, and a lot of Phase 2 was pretty good, except for like the Thor sequel, at least to me. But like, I think I liked everything in Phase 2, except for Thor 2. I was really looking forward to Part 2. And the thing is, I used to have a blog called Geektastic Film Reviews. It actually got me a press pass to C2E2, like the big Chicago comic convention that comes here every year. I did a review of Avengers Age of Ultron after I saw it opening weekend, and I was like over the moon about it. I thought it was the best movie I'd ever seen, kind of thing. Everything about it was fantastic, even though there's a couple things I complained about. Like, I think they spent too little time explaining to you what the hell Ultron really was. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And then I went and saw the movie a second time. My mother wanted to see it, and she rarely goes to see movies by herself. So I went to visit her, and she's like, "I want to see that new Avengers movie." I'm like, "All right, fine, we'll go." And when I saw it the second time, like, all of the flaws really stuck out. And I'm like, "Wow, this isn't a movie. This is a commercial for Phase 3." everything that happens in the movie is just setting up something for that's going to be coming in a later movie. And I was like, this is kind of bullshit. The Vision thing doesn't make any sense. Like, was Thor trying to kill him or bring him to life? They never tell you. He just kind of goes like, "Rah!" Shoot him with lightning. Was I intending to do that to bring it to life? Or was I trying to kill it? What the hell is Ultron? It was an AI that was living inside of the mind gem, but it had a personality that kind of was just like Tony Stark. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just kind of like it's there already. I can't stand it. The only part of this movie that I like is the fight between Iron Man in the Hulkbuster armor versus the Hulk when he's like been enraged by Scarlet Witch. I like the fact that Scarlet Witch is actually doing her mind control stuff in this. They kind of forgot that the character can do that until WandaVision. From that point on, it was just kind of like, I'm just going to fly around and shoot bolts out of my hands and that kind of stuff. And the action scene at the end, it's like, did we really need to have like 5 million little Ultron robots running around? Well, the ending of the first Avengers movie was all those aliens running around trying to take over New York. We got to have something like that. Okay, we'll just duplicate it and just have a whole bunch of robots running around instead of the aliens. I just did not like it. So that is probably at close to, if not at the bottom. No, there's some movies that are worse than it now, I would say. So it's pretty close to the bottom of like my list of Marvel movies, like where they rank. So that is it for tonight. See, look at that. This is the stack of movies I'm talking about tonight. And it took me an hour and 45 minutes to get through them. I can talk about movies forever. Yeah, Retro Coop, I get you. Yeah, I just did not like it. That's the third one is where I was like, hell yeah. And the fourth one especially, hell yeah. Curious where they're going to go with a fifth one. Well, we'll see. Anyway, so that's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming and hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. I will be back next Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Central, with the next video next stream in the Film Collection 2024 streams. Next one will be all about, I'm debating whether I'm just going to stick to the letter B or maybe move into C, but every time I move into another letter, like that probably adds another hour to the stream. So I might just stick to B because I have a lot. My Blu-ray collection is very front of the alphabet heavy. I mean, look at that. That's all A's. So I'm wondering if I should just stick to one specific letter until I get further along in the alphabet where I have like maybe 1 or 2 movies in each letter. So I'm thinking next time it's just going to be strictly the letter B. And then tomorrow I'm going to finally release episode 11 of my Dungeons & Dragons campaign, Tides of Flame. I'm going to release the replay of the stream that I did on Twitch tomorrow. I'm going to upload it tonight. It'll be available probably around 9 a.m. Central tomorrow if you're interested in that. I hope you are. I put a lot of work writing the stories for these, so if it interests you, please check it out. I will talk to you all later. Have a good night, everybody. Stay safe out there. Chris of Midlife Crisis Media out.
A minute, he was scared. He was like flinching. His face went.